Please welcome Christian Hellman. Big applause, please.
Thank you. Hello. Today I want to talk about relearning how to web. Because we seem to have forgotten how amazing it is to build things for the web and how easy it could be. We're overcomplicating everything, we're making everything too hard, and it feels like daunting to actually start to build something. And it shouldn't be like that because it was always easy to do things for the web. Now, when I started 25 years ago, I looked a bit different, and I've done that for 25 years now, and I've been 18 years a blogger. I worked on the largest web products, browsers, and web standards. So I worked on Firefox, I worked on Microsoft Edge, I did the Yahoo front page with like 8 million users and a minute, and these kind of things. So it was always scary how fast I got into these big projects. And I'm not saying that to show off, I'm just saying that it was easy back then to get into these projects because there was nobody else to do it. And there are similar opportunities for you now as well. I wrote books, mostly so my parents would shut up because they didn't know what I was doing. So as soon as they had a book in their hand, they didn't ask questions anymore. They knew I had a job and I got paid. Before that, computers, they didn't know what these things were. So they were basically like, are you homeless? Is it okay? I mean, no, I just look like a homeless person. I'm a programmer. That's what we do. That's what we are. Freelance writer, so on and so forth. I've got a few courses as well. I also do a newsletter every week, which I still have to do for this week, which has 150,000 subscribers, and a lot of the stuff that scares me there, that I find every week that I put out there and see what people think of it. So if you want to have more of those, and a bit of the things that I talk about will be in the newsletter and are in the newsletter every week as well. And I run an event in Berlin with 15,000 developers and 8,000 companies and 500 speakers, and I'm the content program for that. So basically, when you send us talks that you want to give at that conference, I have to look through them and I pick the speakers. If you use ChatGPT to write your presentation, I will actually not get you as a speaker. Please be a person and do something interesting instead. So the web, why I love the web from the beginning is that it was built on resilient technologies. HTML structures things. You say, this is a section, this is an article, this is a heading, this is a paragraph. And CSS applies visuals. This should be green with a blue background, don't do that. This should be animated, this should be having a border, this should have a drop shadow. We have all the things in CSS that we need to do proper interfaces nowadays. For years in CSS, we had to hack things with like floats and table layouts, which was a terrible idea, but we had nothing else, and now we actually have everything. Flexbox, we have grid layouts, all of that is animatable as well, and it took ages in the browser to make all these things work. And why are they resilient? Because they're highly forgiving. If you type a paragraph and you call it paragraph or paragraph, the browser will say, like, I don't know what that is. It's probably a block level element, and I just show it. I just don't mind if you actually make a syntax error in HTML. Doesn't matter. There's no difference. CSS, the same thing. If you do a CSS syntax error, it just says, like, okay, I go to the next line, and I keep rendering. In JavaScript, one error, oh my God, the world is over, and I'm not going to do anything anymore. I'm not playing with you. You're horrible. And that's why CSS and HTML is always a good thing to use because those things can't break. It also is weird that as developers, we don't value them as much because of that. We feel like we need to trust the rendering engine or the parser to do the things for us. We want to be in control. We want to actually understand things more. Now, when it comes to HTML and CSS, and we take a look at like what people build websites with, which one do we actually rely on the most? And the answer is, of course, JavaScript instead of HTML and CSS, because we don't want resilience. We don't want things to be stable. We want to be in control. We want to use everything ourselves. And JavaScript can do all of the other things. So there's a few reasons why 90% of the internet is JavaScript. And one of them is a lack of control feels weird. Sure, CSS tells me it animates it, but it doesn't tell me at what frames per second. I cannot intercept an animation. I don't know where in the process in the animation I am, but if I use GSAP or if I use some other JavaScript library to do animations, I got full control over the animation. That's cooler, but it actually means that you're in control now and you're also responsible for it. The responsibility thing is a weird thing we don't want to do. We hope that the browser does it right, but we want to control that the browser does it right. That's why we actually write things with JavaScript. There's an impatience bit as well. Other platforms moved on, like we had Flash, Silverlight, then later on iOS, Android, and the web always felt like it's falling behind, like it didn't do force push on an iOS device because nobody needed it on the web. That's why there was no standard for it. But people were like, why is the web not having the thing that shouldn't be on the web? I go to do native development instead. And as a perceived complexity, why should I learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript when JavaScript can generate HTML and CSS? So I can actually be in control and throw 5,000 divs there and see what happens, rather than just use a button and use a heading and use a section. And Internet Explorer was, of course, a big problem. Nowadays, people say Safari is the big problem, but Internet Explorer was a big issue because if the browser actually gets built and then the whole team gets fired because people say you never need to upgrade a browser any longer, that is a problem. I was at Microsoft for 8 years, and in my job interview, they asked me what I want to do here, and I said, kill Internet Explorer. And that was the first thing that I said, and they said, okay, we want you for that because we got Edge coming. Can you help us with that browser? And a market push. Developers need to be constant innovators. When we just tell people, I use HTML and CSS because it works, yeah, but what have you invented for the web? Where did you push the envelope? What thing did you invent that next week we don't need? And the problem is, if I look around right now, the web sucks. I tried this on the train the other day. I tried to buy a plane ticket. And the websites were like this, an empty thing with a broken image, or an endless loading spinner, or something that basically gave me a ghost interface that was animated, but I couldn't do anything with it. And then I said, like, okay, fair enough, the website's probably not what you want, so let's go to the app on my mobile phone, which is the same just with a different loading spinner, but it still didn't do anything. I tried 18 times to buy that ticket. I was like, I've got money. Do you want my money for tickets? No, you can't get, I can't get there, so you don't get my money. And there was no way of knowing if the page loaded, where it got stuck, what the problem was. Whereas with a normal website, if it takes too long, it says like, this connection took too long, do you want to try again? Cool. I can have a stop button and say like, that's obviously not doing anything. I want to intercept that as a user as well. 20 years ago, I wrote a self-training course called Unobtrusive JavaScript, which meant JavaScript that is not in your way. That basically means that, yeah, the styling was great, like 3D was just really, really cool thing to do. I'm not a designer, by the way, that is pretty obvious. But it was fun to write that thing because I wrote one thing that still rings true. JavaScript is an enhancement. It's not a secure functionality. We use JavaScript to enhance it, and we don't rely on it because it can be turned off or filtered out by proxies, or a third-party library can go in there and cause an error, or your marketing department puts 10,000 ad trackers on top of your code that slows it down. You're never in control with JavaScript. So do things extra with JavaScript, but not rely on them. And that feels like that's still a thing that we should be considering, especially as it become more and more flaky over the years. There's an American saying called Yagni, you ain't gonna need it, which is a terrible, terrible way to deal with the English language. But it's still a thing that for programmers is probably a good idea. Look at the thing. Is it really necessary already? We're always excited about writing code that can scale to infinity and take anything in that might be coming, but these things never come. And that's why all of our products are so bloated and so big and so slow, because we try to fix problems in the future that actually are not approaching. So a common developer approach to how we do things is we write some code. Then we make it generic. We allow anything in and offer various output. Then we make it perform better by making it harder to read, by making it shorter, by minifying it, doing all kind of stuff that actually do it, that makes it faster in our benchmarks, but actually much harder to maintain and understand. And then we check it for security issues. If there's time, it's not that unnecessary, really. And then we offer it as a package, library, framework, extension, because we've done that great work already, and every other engineer can now work on our beauty and our great product. The problem is that it happens in parallel with dozens of other developers. So we have thousands of packages doing the same things slightly differently, rather than just forking them, adding to them, and making them better. And sometimes it's interesting because it tries to fix with good intentions. This is a package on NPM called isNumber. And this is the source code. So it basically checks if num is number, if the type of is number, and then it does some random num minus num is 0, and then some string num trim, whatever. These are all problems of older versions of V8 and other JavaScript engines put into this thing. So in essence, it was just like isNumber should give you the native isNumber should give you the right thing. Not bad, not that much of a problem, but it's also like, okay, this is not much code, so we can package it in. 70 million downloads a week of that code. 70 million downloads a week of that code. Not cached, not actually added to some other bundle. 70 million downloads every single time you build the thing or people create it, then this gets downloaded. There's one company that realized that and said like, okay, we got the require isNumber. How about we put that one line of code in there? And that's what they did. And then their traffic was 500 gigabyte less a week than they did before because of that dependency. Was it really necessary to have that perfect isNumber? Or might it be just a thing where you can say, okay, do a plus in front of it and actually make a number out of it in JavaScript? That's another option of doing that. This one is also great. IsOdd returns true if the given number is odd and an integer that does not exceed the JavaScript maximum safe integer. Why? I don't know. IsOdd would have been enough, you know? Take a look at the source code. It requires isNumber, first of all, because we want to make sure that it is a number. And then it actually does a absolute value, and then it checks if not isNumber. If not isNumber is so unreadable. And not number is integer, and so on. It throws errors, and then it returns n modulo 2 equals 1. That's actually the isNumber functionality, IsOdd functionality. And nothing else is actually necessary. This is unit tests inside the source code. This should not be in there and is actually unnecessary for the functionality of isOdd. Now, there's also an isEven. Can we guess what that one does? Probably modulo equals 0 rather than 1, right? No. It actually requires isOdd, which also requires isNumber, and then gives us function isEven return not isOddi. This is reused 70 million times a week. This is just unbelievable what we have out there because nobody looks into these packages. This is also great. Ustrict, define property, exports ES module. This is a great source code with no functionality whatsoever. Nothing happens here. This is just the boilerplate, how to build an ES module. And it's being used basically because it's called Dash. And it has also like 14 million a week or something. So why is that? Why does that have so many so many downloads? So this is a super successful NPM package that does nothing. Well, it's called Dash. If I do an npm I foo, I install foo on npm, right? If I do an npm -g foo, I install it globally for all users on that product and everywhere. If I put a space in front of that G, or in my npm I foo bar safe, I put a space in there, I actually install the Dash package and the G package. Because npm has modules called G, S, dash, backslash, all kind of stuff in there. So any type in there basically means you download that thing that does nothing. And it does nothing, that's great, but it could also be malware, we don't know. Because we never audit our dependencies when we do code audits. We only audit our own code. So as a web developer, when I started, I wrote an index.html and I started writing. And I FTP'd it over to a server and I saw it in live then later on. Starting a new project now is you get the right editor with the right extensions. Because if you don't use Cursor, if you don't use WebStorm, if you don't use VS Code, you're not a real developer. Everybody has their favorite environment, and we all write blog posts and articles about that, being very excited about it. Set up your terminal with the right font and all the cool dot files, because before that you can't actually be a professional developer as well. Install framework Flugelhorn with bundler Wolpertinger IO. Go to terminal and run package stuff -g install. Look at all the warning messages and update dependencies. Doesn't work, do sudo. That's probably the right way to do, to actually install all these things so you don't get the warning messages. Don't bother with the size of the modules folder. Learn the abstraction wind farm CSS because it makes you so much more effective than CSS. And then use the templating language FunSocks because it's so much smaller than HTML. And then check out the amazing Hello World example an hour later. This is how we start developing these days, because we got too focused on making developers more effective rather than our code more effective. And there's a big market in there, like all these libraries and all these things are great for people, but it's actually really depressing as a new developer to get started that way. I love that one where somebody started working as a DevOps engineer and created a static site in AWS, and the monthly cost was actually estimated at that number because of all the things that she didn't set, all the limits that she didn't set. In essence, we rely on too many things that we do not control. We have all these packages in there that we don't know about. We use these abstraction libraries because they make us more effective, but we don't know how much they actually add to it. And it's always like, gzipped, it's only 2K. Yeah, which means like ungzipped, it's like 500 gig. I don't know. Like these kind of the measurements where we say like this is small. Every library starts smaller than the old one, and then new features come in, and then there's a new one coming because the old one is actually smaller again than the middle one. So it's endless race that we do here. I love that. Please do not turn on the light switch because it operates the elevator. That's what I see a lot in our things as well. Don't delete that modules folder because you don't know what's in there. There is, I think, a Polish saying that says, "Not my circus, not my monkeys," and I absolutely love this. Do not take on responsibility that you don't need to take on. Don't say that it's going to work on every browser and every platform and every user out there, because you cannot say that. You cannot control this. So when you basically say we're using React because then it works for Meta, doesn't mean that your product actually works the same way unless you actually build Facebook and then work for Meta but don't use their stuff. There should be a simpler web for developers, and there is already, if we think about it, because a lot of these abstractions fix problems that don't exist any longer. Browsers are constantly updated. There is no outdated browser anymore. iOS also releases more and more Safaris than we wanted before. We don't have that issue that it takes like a year for browsers to die out and become the next version. It's very obvious that you actually have a moving target with browsers, and you should just keep up to date with the latest version. Try out nightlies, try out builds, try out these things for new features. But I'm talking to the void here. I worked on Edge for 8 years, and we gave you previews. We gave you insider builds. We gave you source code, and nobody cared. Like, people just basically waited until the next version of Windows came out with the next version of it because we still thought it was 1995. You are in control of browsers. If something is broken in a browser, don't go on Twitter and complain about it. Go to GitHub and complain there. File a bug. All the bug trackers of all the browsers are open, available to you. And we love you for every bug that comes in because we don't have to find it. That way, the outside world can actually help us fix the browser and make it much, much better. The web standardization process is much faster than it used to be. It was just basically a black hole. We didn't know what was going to come next. But now you get previews. This Friday, I'm going to talk about two new W3C features that are coming out this week. Great stuff. Basically, everything is in the open. You can be part of that. We don't all need to build the next killer app. I'm actually tired of this endless race of saying like, X was the fastest, ChatGPT is the fastest, now Blue Sky is the fastest. All of you have to build the thing to change the world. How about we build apps that work? Like, I could buy a ticket to buy on a plane, not the crap that I just saw. How about just basically fixing things that are in banking environments? The biggest letdown I had lately was during the COVID pandemic, because you cannot tell me that we as developers couldn't have built an app that tracks who's vaccinated and who's not. The German government spent 10 million euros on that app. That's a bloody database with a form on front of it. There's nothing special about that app. But instead of just saying like, we can save the world and we're going to have like, Google I/O like half a year before the pandemic, it's like, we're going to have like contact lenses that can say if you got like diseases. And then the disease came and everybody's like, no idea how to track that. I have no idea what to do now. Like, what do we do? Probably ask for 10 million euros and then give them an app we already had. So solve real problems, solve smaller problems. And when it comes to your startup, your company, I want to talk about a new project soon, not in this talk. I'm getting off topic here. But I want to talk about happy sizing. Not growth hacking, not getting bigger, not being the next X, the next Meta. I meet more and more people that are basically having a real life, have children, have a family, and have a single product that they actually maintain, which is having 100 users, 200 users that pay for it, and that actually is enough for them to make a living off it. They're happy to keep their product maintained. They're happy to keep their product with new features, but they don't want to be the killer app. Just like, here's the thing that I do, and here's my dog, here's my family, here's my life. We deserve a life as developers as well. We don't deserve to be wage slaves that are there 8 hours a day. When I worked in the Silicon Valley, all the people working for me had much more money than me. They all had like big Teslas and Porsches and things on the parking lot, and they saw them from the window. And they never used the things. They just basically sat in the office for 14 hours and accumulated money for nothing. And by the age of 25, 28, they were burned out and actually had to take a year off. This is not a life that we should be striving for. This is not glamorous. This is not great. This is just stupid. This is like factory workers with more money. That makes no sense to me. Our goal should be to optimize. Should not be to optimize the developer experience. Our goal should be satisfied visitors using working, resilient products. If something goes wrong in your product, don't show an endless spinner. Just have a timeout of 5 seconds and say like, oh, something happened there. Can you please try again? And please give us error messages that make sense, not like object is undefined or error message 276, contact us here about it. These messages don't help anybody out there. We also have a much simpler web for users. Browsers are damn good at optimizing the user experience. And the reason is, browser makers are measured on how speedy the browser is and how resource hungry it gets. You know, all the jokes about like Chrome now eating all your RAM and these kind of things. So browsers get optimized for the end users. So use the web functionality, use the standard web components and things like that, because the browsers optimize these things for you. Operating systems allow users to customize the experience to their needs. Turned off animations. Your app should not show animations when people have animations turned off. And there's a CSS query for that. You can actually do that. Users spend a lot of time doing so to set up their operating system to their needs. So it's actually up to us to make all efforts to actually say, okay, you need bigger fonts. My app can deal with bigger fonts. I always like it when people send me like designs and it's like, that's 5 words fit in there. And I'm like, okay, here's 5 German words that don't fit in there. Or here's 5 Finnish words that don't fit in there. Or here's some Polish words that nobody can read. Like, people really have to, our interfaces have to be resilient to change and resilient to content. And that's something to concentrate on rather than like, how effective are my developers? In other words, optimize what you control. And what is that? What your users end up getting is in your control. Send lots of semantic HTML. It doesn't matter how much. You cannot go wrong with HTML. It gets gzipped on HTTP3 servers. Servers do the stuff for you. Don't worry about the amount of HTML that you send, unless it's randomly generated HTML by your JavaScript library that's all divs nested 15 times. That's a problem. Use the newest setups. Servers can optimize for you. They actually do all the work that you normally had to do by hand nowadays. Use the right formats, WebP, AVIF, PNG, and optimize them before integrating into it via CDN service. So images are the biggest performance problem that we still have on the web. And it's not only how long it takes to download them, but also how much memory it takes to render them on the machine. Like when you got like a 5,000 pixel image and you show it as 100 by 100, you still use all the memory for the 5,000 by 5,000 pixel image. When I worked on Firefox, every single time I released a new browser, I had a person that emailed me and said, it can't show the images that I have to work with. And I'm like, okay, what image is that? 500,000 by 300,000 pixels. And I'm like, why would you want to display that in a browser? That's what Leaflet is for. That's what Google Maps interfaces are for, to stream through a data set like that, rather than show it as one image. Pick your servers where your users are. A long travel through cables is still slow. I mean, it fascinates me when people set up AWS in Germany or in Poland and always use like the Western American server farms. And you're like, no, they actually have them here. Use those and you will see how far your latency goes down. That's a really good idea. And in Germany, it's also a good idea because you actually have to keep it in the country with GDPR compliance and all these kind of things. Don't understand the Great Helper library? Maybe don't use it then. If Tailwind is really making you so much more effective, but you don't understand how it works, it's like in Harry Potter. If you can't understand the magic, then there's some dark thing going on there. Don't trust it. Removing old band-aids is a very, very important thing as well. So old polyfills and libraries, things that said like, if you use this, it also works in Internet Explorer 5. Don't care. Internet Explorer 5 is dead. All the users of Internet Explorer 5 are probably dead as well. And if there's still users of Internet Explorer 5 out there, don't give them anything beautiful. They're not used to that. Just make it look as crappy as possible. That's what they're actually used to. It will just confuse them. If it fixes things that aren't an issue anymore, bin it. If it makes things more convenient but has a web platform native equivalent, bin it. If it's only used in one interaction and part of your app, don't put it in the bundle, but load it on demand when that part of the app comes up, rather than just having one bundle with everything in there up front. Browsers do great things for us. They keep the history state. That's something we always have to simulate when we use our own routers, or we used Flash, or we used Silverlight. Allow for interception and reload. If it doesn't load, then I actually hit the stop button and reload the page myself. Users are clever, they do that. You don't actually have to do that for them. Tell you when a connection fails, cache and preload things, allow for bookmarking and sharing. If you haven't seen view transitions in action yet, that is one of the things that gets me most excited right now in the browser space. Just write static HTML pages that go from one page to another and use page transitions, and it looks like this. It gives you an app-like experience, but you can see the URL up there changes. So it's actually it's a transition from one state to another that you can define as a developer. But you don't actually have to use an extra router or make the whole page with HTML, with JavaScript. You just set these transitions. Ironically, Internet Explorer 4 had the similar thing, but it looked like us, so nobody used it. But now we have that in Chromium and also in Safari. It's pretty amazing. Only deliver what is needed. I love that somebody from Amazon sent this package and they couldn't get into their house and couldn't get out of it because of that anymore. Media queries are great for that. So if you have CSS that you don't need, like for example, you've got a style sheet here, and that should work, doesn't matter. You have a style sheet here that is a light theme and a dark theme. Only load it when it's either dark or light. Don't load it every single time. And the browser does that for you just with this media query. You also get those in JavaScript. You can use them there as well. And just put something around your animation and say, like, if animations are turned off, then actually don't load that animation library. If it's turned on, then load it. But don't give things to people that they don't need. A great example for that was our website. There was a picture of me, Chris Heilman. We are developers with file size was just 389K. And it was 92 gigabyte of traffic a month. Just that picture of me. And I'm like this big in that picture, so it's the whole room with like me in the back. So it's like, holy crap. And the company that we work with was basically emailing us that we have too much traffic, what's going on there. We looked at our contract with them, like it doesn't say how much traffic we need to do, so we don't really care. But like it's nice to actually see why it's actually that slow. Turned out that what you see is what you get, or no-code environment, put my photo as a background image in a class called W4HalfImage that was used everywhere on this website. So instead of the only time where we needed that photo, it would actually keep requesting in the background even without displaying it, because it was in a class as a background image. The reason why the what you see is what you get environment probably used as a background image was because background images in the past with older browsers were much easier to control. You had like stretch them, you could object fit them and these kind of things. But nowadays we have that with normal images as well. So if you just use object fit, you can put an image in there as a real image with an alternative text, and you have the same features that we only used to have in background images in the past. Images also have a loading property, so you can just say loading lazy. And if it's not in the viewport yet, if people haven't scrolled to the image yet, the image will not get loaded. You don't have to do anything for that. Back in the days, we had to do that with JavaScript to read the scroll position and the position of the image, and then make sure that you don't that you actually debounce that because it was really slow. Loading equals lazy on any image, and you don't have to worry about it because the browser does it for you. Same with the script element defer property. And in general, it's a good idea to keep up to date with what the platform is doing. CSS is giving up control, and you as developers should think the same things. We as non-designers, we always said like, okay, I'm going to have a table layout that's 400 pixels by 600 pixels with 12 pixel image font size. Forget all of that. Your users will not have a screen that actually needs the size that you want to be in. Be as flexible as you want to be. We changed from viewport sizes to flex blocks grid, growing and shrinking with the content that basically shows me as much as I can on the screen right now. Pixels to percentages, and now we have EM, REM, and viewport sizing and container sizing. So basically it will be as big as the container, the font, rather than like too big for the container. Width and height to aspect ratio. Aspect ratio is great. Image width equals 400, aspect ratio 1:1, it will always be 400 by 400. You don't have to worry about the image that you load in there. The browser will do that for you. Box model definitions to independence of writing order, because we have Hebrew websites that go from right to left. We have Japanese websites that go from top to bottom. So saying like top, left, right, bottom doesn't make any sense because you never know which direction the page is going to go. So that's a thing to also consider. There's amazing HTML and CSS stuff. You get like autocomplete, required, and pattern on input elements that would give you like an interface like that where you type something in and you type the wrong thing in, and it gives you immediate feedback what's going on there. And if you type it in there, then you get like an excellent stuff, Popper API, which is a popover. These are all HTML features that are in there right now. There's not a single line of JavaScript needed. This is all basically in HTML right now as attributes. This is the popover API. There's also the dialog element. There's a details element. When I did our videos for the Congress, we had like 400 videos, and it was 4,500 hours of footage. And the first year, before I joined the company, it took us 7 months to edit all these videos. This year, I did it in 1 week with 40 lines of PHP, because I just generated FFmpeg and created things. And when I wanted to get people to test these things, this is what the page looked like. So you can actually go through it and say like, okay, this is the speaker. Is that data all correct? And you can do a search, and it automatically opens the bit where it found the search result in the browser. And the whole source code is details and summary elements. There's no HTML, no JavaScript, no framework, nothing in there. This is just what the browser gives you with these new 2 HTML elements. It's really, really lovely. Forget browser delays having an impact. Safari is coming out all the time as well. There's a new browser every week. Don't worry about the browsers that people use. Make your code defensive. Make the code say like anything that can go wrong. Are you there? Can you use that? Okay, then I will use it rather than just using it. And that means you spend more time testing and less time trying to reinvent the web. Of course, it would be remiss of me to not talk about AI, because that's the big thing that's happening right now. And of course, we all talk about AI as an replacing us as developers, but also making sure that we're much more effective than we are before. And I'm just going to go on the tangent here that AI just costs a lot of money. Not for you, but actually energy consumption is ridiculously high in AI. So making sure that you use AI as a thing to aid you as a developer, great. Creating everything with AI just because we can, not necessarily the best for the planet right now. I know I'm in the minority, and like somebody in America just got voted president and voted somebody in as his environmental advisor that says there is no global warming, but seeing what's going on every day, I see that it is. So making an image with generative AI uses as much energy as charging your phone. That's why Microsoft, Apple, and Amazon are actually building their own nuclear power plants. We're going back to nuclear power plants. What is this, 1982? It's just really driving me crazy that we waste that amount of energy. Google, Microsoft, and others underreported their data center emission by 626%. Like 4 years ago, every company said like, "Oh, by 2026 we're gonna be carbon neutral." You don't see any headline like that any longer because everybody bets on AI for everything and burns through things. Like when you go to Google to Bing Generator and say like, "Create a comic picture of an elephant on roller skates with a sign that says hooray." One time charging my phone for each of these images. Every time I'd ask Bing to do it, it gives me 4 images. This is what they look like. It's actually almost impressive to misspell hooray 4 different times, but it managed to do it. This was wasteful, and I'm not doing anything bad here. People who do like deep fake videos and all kind of TikTok filters and everything, the amount of crap we generate with AI is just horrendous these days. And it actually says that 57% of the content on the internet is AI generated and is subtly killing quality search results. And Google have given up. They're not indexing websites anymore. They asked you to come around and index their website because it's generated crap on the internet that overwhelmed the Google search or the Bing search out there as well. Now, I had a talk last week and also an article about that. What happens to junior developers? Are they an endangered species because of AI? Because everything we wrote as junior developers actually can be done with computers these days, with LLMs these days as well. The idea is that you start writing a lot of code as a junior developer. The more you get promoted, the less code you write, but the more reviewing of other people's code you do. You look at the junior developer's code and say like, okay, here's an error, that is a performance issue. How do you think you could improve that? And with LLMs these days, we're like, where do juniors get that knowledge from? Rather than just like, here's the code that's generated by an LLM, not by myself. So there's no ownership of code any longer. So are code assistants replacing juniors was the big thing that I asked in that article and that thing. And it actually shows that code assistants erode programming skills. AI assistants are not as useful as we think they actually are for developers because they keep sending us down the same rabbit holes. And AI-generated code makes you a bad programmer. That's actually a much more statement. But the thing is that AI is here, and we should use it. We should use it for creating and automated testing. We should do it in context with validation inside our developer tools. So I love GitHub Copilot, and I worked on that from the first day on. And it aids me in my coding. It doesn't. I don't go to ChatGPT, generate code, and copy and paste it over and hope it works. Like, if it's in context, then AI makes a lot of sense for developers. As an invisible aid to the user, like things that just happen in the background, I can go on a Mac and I can go to Spotlight and say, show me all PDFs that are older than 3 weeks with the word elephant in it. I can type that into a search box, and I didn't know it works, but it does work. So under the hood, there's a lot of machine learning, NLP going on, but it actually does the job for me rather than just replacing it. As much on device as possible. If you actually get a chance to host your own models on your device rather than using it somewhere in the cloud, do that. It's more control and privacy as well. And transparently in accordance with privacy laws. There's also a huge security issue. There was a talk at our live days where he actually shows how many security problems are in LLM-generated code and how many people are actually trying to get LLMs to send malware to end users nowadays. GitHub came up with the idea of 1 billion new developers. Question is, what is a developer? So that's something that I'm going to talk about next. Like, is a developer an engineer? Is a developer creator? Is a developer designer? Is a developer somebody who types something into an LLM and really optimizes the prompt? It's a very, very moving scale right now. But things we should aim for to wrap up. Control over what ends up in your apps. Code reviews should include dependencies. Don't include that is number, or that is odd, or that is even without knowing what it does, because it adds to the performance of your application. Being diligent in what we use for what purpose. No need to add the kitchen sink every single time. No, you don't have to start with React if you make a calculator. Not necessarily needed. Finding joy in keeping things simple and using the platform. And that's all I had, so thank you very much.